I think so too. I suspect he didn't really want to hang out with Uncle Andrew either.
I think also generationally, I think William's he's a few years older than me. He's of a generation where Andrew, the way he will see the problem of Andrew is different.
Hello and welcome to the Royals with me, Roya, and today, not Kate, because Kate's taking a well-deserved break. So this week, I'm joined by the Sunday Times' media editor, Rosamund Urwin. Ros, hello, and thank you so much for joining us this week.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, you've got a bit of a royal warrant going on, haven't you? Because you've met the King and Queen. I
have only once, I should add.
That's enough.
Okay, so I do have a tiny, I had a short meeting with them when they came I used to work at the Evening Standard, the King and Queen, then obviously not the King and Queen at that stage. They came in to talk to staff. And actually, I spoke to Camilla about... she was very impressive. I mean, she really does care very much about women's issues. And weirdly, we spoke about FGM.
Yeah.
But she obviously, and this was quite far ahead of it being a more mainstream conversation.
Yeah.
So that was bold of her.
She can be punchy when she wants to be with the causes she chooses. And in terms of how people might wonder how you and I work together sometimes, because we do, don't we?
Yes, we do. Yeah. Yeah, I like a Roya Ros.
How does a Roya Ros mashup roll? How does the royal and media stuff roll, do you think? I think we...
Well, they overlap quite a lot, don't they?
Yeah.
I suppose a lot of the trickiness for the royals comes from media coverage, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
A lot of the difficult part for them to manage. And sometimes that relationship is obviously friendly and sometimes it's less friendly, isn't it?
Sometimes it's friendly foe and sometimes it's friction foe.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Well, it's always a joy to work with you and it's lovely to have you on this week. So thank you for coming on. Now, events this week overshadowed by the death of Pope Francis, which really has been leading the news all week. We saw him make an appearance at the Vatican on Easter Sunday. And just a couple of weeks before, Kate and I were in Rome, where we didn't have the state visit to the Holy See, which we were supposed to have because he was just out of hospital and recovering. But the King and Queen did get to meet him privately for a quick 20-minute meeting despite his ill health. And that moment, I think, seems quite poignant now, given they were really sort of among the last big public figures to meet with him.
Yes, and obviously he's been very unwell.
We have the funeral coming up. I know it's something that you're particularly interested in and have quite a lot of thoughts on because you are Catholic, aren't you?
I'm Catholic, yeah.
So in terms of a pope dying and all the sort of events of state that go around with it, because it's been quite interesting as a royal editor to sit back and watch that and kind of compare it to the only funeral I've worked on, which was, of a monarch, the late Queen Elizabeth, did Prince Philip's. Talk to us a little bit about how they compare and the rituals.
Well, I was thinking that actually we're already seeing a quite profound difference in that obviously the Queen does lie in state, but in a coffin.
Yeah.
And with obviously a flag over the top.
Yeah.
And we see the Pope. I suppose that's a pretty Catholic thing.
Why do we see the Pope? Why in the lying in state? Why is that so different to like Queen Elizabeth?
I think there's two things. Culture and tradition. I mean, my family originally, part of my family originally Irish, and obviously there's a tradition in Ireland of seeing bodies, and that's a very Catholic thing, isn't it? I also think British people are a little bit squeamish about such things, I would say.
Yeah.
I don't know when. I don't know if we changed that. Did we used historically to see? No, so we've never seen the King's or Queen's bodies.
The one thing that they have done that's sort of similar, which I've noticed, was massively underestimate the turnout.
Yes, absolutely.
So the queue yesterday for the Vatican to see the Pope lying in state was 8 hours. And originally yesterday, the Vatican was saying
they were going to close it at midnight. Yeah.
But I woke up this morning to headlines that it's been open all night.
Yes, that's right.
And that was similar to when the Queen died and when Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, died. They hugely underestimated how many people would come and see them.
Well, I think that's quite interesting, isn't it? Because I suppose people want to feel like a part of history. That's part of it. People want to pay their respects. These are people, actually, there's a parallel, isn't there? People who've given a huge amount of service to the country, or in this case, to the 1.4 billion Catholics in the world. So I get that instinct. I mean, I'd really quite like to have been there in Rome. Obviously, I'm working, so it's not possible. But I do get that feeling. I have gone to see the Pope speak before. in Rome when I was last there. And actually, I also went to see Pope John Paul II when I was still a student. We went to hear him speak. And actually, he was towards the end of his life. I think he died in 2005.
He did.
So I went in about 2003. So by then, he was ailing as well. So I have seen. I've never got up close to a pope, but I've seen both of them speak. And I think with it, people want to feel there's a sense of belonging, isn't there? A sense of being part of something. Obviously, the primary thing of paying a respect. And I think as well, lots of people went after work, didn't they? Because, they sort of feel this is something you've got a finite time. It's a moment of history and be part of it.
The King put out, when we learned that he had died on Monday, it talked about how special it had been to see him so recently and how, it paid tribute to the work that he did for the underrepresented, the poor, the minorities, immigrants. And actually, we were told this week that when Charles had his weekly audience with Keir Starmer, the Pope was a huge topic of conversation, them both reflecting on his life with each other during the weekly audience. Although we didn't have the state visit to the Holy See that we were all hoping for, so we didn't get to go to the Vatican. When Charles and Camilla did go and see him for 20 minutes on their wedding anniversary, and the Pope wished them a happy 20th wedding anniversary, when we came off that trip, we had a briefing with the palace who told us that of the whole sort of visit, really for the couple, personally wise, that was the highlight of the trip from the sort of off the official programme. It was very special for them to see him. I'm sure they will have known probably one last time.
Yeah.
And they have that photograph of them meeting the Pope. And although the King isn't going to the funeral, and there's a lot of people are like, why is the King not going to Rome? He's the King. Now, there's an interesting protocol issue there, which is unique to this country really, because a lot of international heads of state and a lot of, King Felipe and Queen Letizia and European royals are all going.
But lots of them are in Catholic countries, so it's different.
They are, but technically, the Prince William is going on to represent his father, and that's on government advice, because there is a protocol here. The government advice is that British monarchs don't traditionally attend funerals in foreign countries. It just is. It's nothing to do with the King being too unwell or it boosting William as a statesman. Although we are seeing him do more and more of that. That is protocol. And you might remember when Pope John Paul II died.
Charles went
to represent the Queen, which then shifted his wedding date. He had to change his wedding date to Camilla because of the Pope's funeral. So that is that protocol.
And is it because they worry it sort of takes attention away, or is it just...
There doesn't seem to be a sort of explanation for it. It's just one of those things that historically has... Because I don't think the King going would take more attention than Donald Trump going.
No.
I mean, Trump was literally the first person who said, I'm going, wasn't he? Within minutes of the Pope's death being announced, he's like, I'm there.
Yes, but there was also the very, unfortunately amusing thing where he gave a speech on the balcony with a giant bunny for Easter next to him.
It was quite weird.
Yes. Yes. It was, I mean, I thought both the King and Keir Starmer put out very good, well thought out statements, and then we sort of jumped next to that, and it perhaps didn't quite set the tone that you might want in that situation.
No. Different kind of tone.
The other thing with Francis, of course, is that while for people Catholics like me, he is a great hero and a great inspiration, and exactly what we had always dreamed of in a pope, he is a divisive figure for the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church, there are conservatives within it for whom he was a difficult pill to swallow.
Reformer.
Yes, he's progressive. It's very strange because in the coverage this week, the BBC published something straight away, and I have to say, as a Catholic, you always think the media in this country is not amazing in its coverage. The BBC put something out straight away calling Pope Francis traditional. He is not traditional by any stretch. It's a very, he's progressive within the realm of it being the Catholic Church.
And I think that's probably one of the reasons why Charles has had such respect for him, because Charles, as Prince of Wales, was seen as very progressive.
Yes, absolutely.
And not a disruptor, but someone liberal leaning.
Well, there's a meeting of minds on issues like climate change as well.
So Pope Francis, hugely sort of pro campaigning on climate. He wrote huge documents about it. That is something that you can imagine in all their meetings. Charles and the Pope spoke a lot about. the king being a huge environmentalist and him and the Pope as well.
And I think also for the Pope, one of the issues is that climate change will disproportionately affect the global south and the poor. And he is a Pope from the global south, and obviously the first ever, and obviously somebody who has believed that his mission, particularly he's the first Jesuit Pope. That's something not already talked about again in the British media. That's a really big deal in the Catholic Church. The Jesuits were not traditionally, they were sort of always viewed with a little bit of suspicion by the hierarchy of the Catholic Church. I suspect we won't get a second Jesuit Pope, possibly not in my lifetime, but it would be highly unlikely that we get that his successor is a Jesuit. So I think yes, you can see there are definitely things that are aligned between the two of them in terms of what they care about. Meeting of the minds,
I think, for those two. Anyway, well, William will be there in Rome on Saturday representing the king without the Princess of Wales. She won't be travelling with him, but William will be going. So here in the UK, cast ourselves back to a few days ago, we saw the traditional Easter Sunday service last week at Windsor Castle, and there was a newsworthy attendee with the king and queen and the rest of the royal family, Ros. It was the return, he was risen, of Prince Andrew.
Yes. Yes, not such a great reappearance.
Lesser spotted these days. Yes. We hadn't seen Andrew for quite a long time. We didn't see him at Christmas because even though he had been re-invited to Christmas for the last few years, he'd always been there, but he'd been re-invited to sort of walk with the family to church for the last couple of years.
Was he being asked to use the entrance at the back or something? No?
Well, previously, after the Newsnight interview, he did spend Christmases with the Queen at Sandringham, but he wasn't allowed to walk with her and the rest of the family to St Mary's Church. Now, at Rain Change, the King's view was it's a family event. He can walk with us. But last Christmas, there was an alleged Chinese spy that reappeared, hanging out with Andrew, and so that would have been seen as a distraction. So he didn't even go to Sandringham. But come Easter Sunday, there he was at St George's Chapel in Windsor, to the surprise of, I would say, a lot of royal watchers. Not only for him being there after all the distractions of what's been going on around him, and that's still swirling. I mean, there's still so much coming out from court documents about and witness statements from Dominic Hampshire, this guy who was working with Prince Andrew and liaising with Yang Tenbo, the alleged Chinese spy who insists he isn't a Chinese spy. But anyway, there was Andrew, and he was very confidently sort of stomping to the front of the queue and, dodging the Dean of Windsor, and in he went kind of before a few other royals. And, there was the inevitable coverage. I wonder if, when you look at that, you and I talked about Prince Andrew a fair amount.
Yes, we have. He's given us plenty to talk about.
He's given us plenty to talk about around the water cooler. What do you make of that when you see him as someone who sort of?
I think he's an example of where you need really good crisis comms, and so.
Yes, media editor.
Yeah,
You're right.
I mean that's where I think the place for all that is. Look, journalists don't necessarily always love working with crisis communications people because they tend to be trying to cover up something, don't they? They tend to be trying to stop you running things and writing things that they don't want to appear in the media. But sometimes the thing is sort of gushing out, and there's a way to handle it. You can sometimes obviously get on the front foot. Of course, the irony is that Prince Andrew was trying to get on the front foot with that interview
yes.
with Emily Maitlis that went so badly.
Wrong.
Yeah, and so I think here. It's difficult, isn't it? Because they're a family, ultimately, and we all have our awkward relatives.
Yeah. What's interesting about that is there seems to be a distinction that Buckingham Palace say Andrew will be welcome at family events, and this was a family event. That's not really the case, because Sandringham Christmas was a family event. He was effectively banned from that. Trooping the Colour is seen as a family event. He never appears at that anymore. He's not on the balcony. And so there is this attempt to kind of navigate what he is and he isn't at. But I think the one thing everyone can agree on is whenever he does appear, it is a distraction from the rest of the family and
yes,
what they're
and
doing.
that feels unfair, doesn't it? Because, for them, as in it's an inevitable distraction.
Yeah.
It feels unfair on other members of the royal family who are not causing bad headlines that he becomes the focus when they're,
Well, he was a surprise attendee, and then there was a surprise notable absence because William wasn't there, nor Kate or their children. They decided to spend the weekend as a family with their family, and actually the Middletons up in Norfolk. There was quite a lot of discussion around that, a little bit of speculation on that William was swerving Prince Andrew, Uncle Andrew, doesn't like the optics of it. Palace sources insisting, no, it's because he wants to spend it as a family. And, people going, does that mean he's not going to church? No, he did go to church. He went to church up in Norfolk. I would say, and this would be my sort of view, given the year he's had, his father still going through cancer treatment, his wife now in remission for cancer, I think want to spend time as a family, let them spend time as a family.
Yeah, and they've got the kids of the age where they really, really enjoy Easter.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the first year, I've got a 4-year-old, the first year my eldest son really enjoyed Easter. They go bananas for it. So there's a window, isn't there, where for children, it's an Easter egg hunt is really fun.
Yeah.
And they're in that window, all three of them. So I think that's rather sweet.
I think so too. I suspect he didn't really want to hang out with Uncle Andrew either.
I think also generationally, I think William's he's a few years older than me. He's of a generation where Andrew, the way he will see the problem of Andrew is different.
100%.
Yeah.
He's thinking, William is always thinking, not just about the now, about the future, what kind of king I want to be. Am I the kind of future king who hung out with my uncle sort of in public all the time? I think he chooses not to, if I'm honest. And that's his choice.
And he's got plenty of other family members who he probably really prefers the company of.
And also, he does, they're always at Sandringham, and for Christmas, the Middletons are as much of his family, a support to him and his wife and the family as the other side of his family. So anyway, that was Williams. Now, as I'm joined by Ros, our media editor on the Sunday Times, it would feel very remiss not to discuss branding, media, image. Who might all of this be perfectly encapsulated in but Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex?
Yeah, it's a very curated image.
Who you have written quite a lot about, actually.
Yes, I have. I've written quite a lot about. I think I've written more about Harry and Meghan probably than any other royals. That's probably right. I have obviously written about Andrew too.
Do you enjoy writing about Harry and Meghan?
Do you know what? I've really enjoyed Harry's book.
It was a cracking read.
And I'm very pleased that I did get a story ahead of the book coming out on that, which was really, I remember that being a really difficult story to get. So I was very pleased because I'd found someone who'd read it. I actually really enjoyed reading that book. So that was a moment where I suddenly thought, they'd obviously got a brilliant ghost. He's a brilliant writer. I actually went and read his memoir.
It's all about fathers and sons.
Yes, it's very some
interesting.
Parallels.
That
yes, he's got a much more absent father and a much more a very difficult relationship with his father. I really enjoyed that. So there are moments, and sometimes it means I have to watch much of the Netflix series that Meghan made, so and that is maybe less enjoyable.
So there has been a lot of sort of media strategy around Meghan. So we've had the new Netflix series with Love Meghan, all about her sort of home entertaining and cooking, which Kate and I have discussed endlessly. It feels like on this podcast. We've had a new podcast from her, Confessions of a Female Founder, which launched a couple of weeks ago. We've had the launch of her As Ever brand of raspberry spread and edible flower
which
petals.
Sold really well.
Well, it sold out apparently. We still don't know how much stock there was because you can't actually order it here. It can't be shipped to the UK, sadly, so I can't buy you any raspberry spread, I'm afraid. And we've just had Meghan and Harry in New York yesterday. Meghan was at the Time 100 Summit, and she was talking about her incredibly busy time, as she described it. And talking about the fact that she doesn't go online. She says she doesn't look at social media to protect her mental health.
Yeah, I mean, look, if
do we believe that?
No, but I think it's a noble ambition not to. I mean,
because she's on social media a lot.
Yes, I mean, but the thing about Instagram, I find, is that, and look, I'm quite careful. I have private settings, but I find that Instagram is a lot less nasty than some other sites. But it's not for everybody, obviously. I mean, if you're somebody like her, you're going to get quite unpleasant comments there too. But I think there is a sort of, it feels a friendlier side to a lot of people. So she's very heavily on Instagram now, isn't she, with her lifestyle?
A lot.
So, she is embodying, I think, with what she's doing, one of the worst sort of portmanteau words ever created, a mumpreneur. And that's her sort of shtick, isn't it? And I'm afraid if I get emails mentioning that word, I just have to delete them straight away. I do not read them. I hate that word.
You're right, because let me read you what she said at the summit this week in New York. She said, I think as a working mum, and again, these are the 3 projects that we're all launching really at the same time. She's talking about what we've just discussed. The behind the scenes for the past year and a half have been incredibly busy and ambitious. But to see it all come to life and try to give yourself the space and the grace to make mistakes, to know that you're not going to get it right every day, and at the same time to prioritise what we're going to put out as our next tranche of skews, is equally important to me as Archie losing his front tooth, which is about to happen. And I just hope we're back at home in time for it. That's all that matters. So she is
skews, next tranche of skews. What does that
I
mean?
don't know. That's a bit word salad
Yeah,
to me.
well, we know she likes her word salads.
She has
doesn't
confessed to a bit of word salad this week, hasn't she?
American Riviera Orchard, is that right? I sort of feel you could put any of those words in any order.
The original name for the original launch of
As ever.
But then it sort of disappeared and was rebranded as ever. And she's admitted this week in her latest episode of her podcast, I didn't love that. That was word salad.
Yeah. Well, I think she slides quite easily into jargon, doesn't she? That is one of her things. And sometimes it's that sort of kind of like holistic type jargon, you know, it's sort of about the wellness jargon, that's a better way of putting it. She slips into that quite easily. And then I think she's also slipping into this slightly brand jargon that comes out.
What do you make of the rebrand? Because it has been a bit of a rebrand into a sort of Martha Stewart, Gwyneth Paltrow style.
I mean, look, I sort of think live and let live about most things in life. I'm pretty much of that school. She's got to find something, hasn't she? I mean, I find it a bit sad. She was a fairly successful actress. I mean, Suits was a massive hit.
Yeah.
I find it a bit sad that she doesn't think she has a path back into acting. Obviously, it is always hard. I mean, I've got friends who are older actresses, and you know, the industry can be brutal to older women. So
I think anyone were to hire her just for the publicity she brings to projects.
Exactly, of course, exactly. And, you know, there are things she can do within that industry. Obviously, a lot of actresses move into producing. So there are other options. But when they've done that, it's been very still focused on them. And what's been successful has been the most focused on them parts of it. So all of their Netflix projects, the ones that have been hits, have been the ones that are much more the brand is them. And so, you know, when they've done the polo thing, you know, did anyone really watch that? I can't imagine it did particularly well.
It didn't fly.
You know, it didn't get the sort of pickup because they were only in it for about 10 seconds or something, or 2 minutes, whatever. But so I think the difficulty is they sort of come back to knowing what sells of them. And unfortunately, it's themselves. And that's quite a difficult thing, I think.
Because they've said they want to step back from the sort of tell-all. We had the Netflix six-parter, which was tell-all. We had Spare, which was beyond tell-all. We had the Oprah interview, which was tell-all. So if you're then going to step back and try and market something else, and to be fair, with Love Meghan it's not tell-all, but it's a lot of her. It's, you know, taking the viewers into a little bit of her life. But you're right. People want to kind of get inside the Harry and Meghan world and see more of that and hear more of that. So,
and we've got a second Netflix series coming.
Yes.
Which I think they were actually recorded back to back.
They have already recorded it, yes.
So yeah, it's not Netflix doubling down because it's already been done. So
it's
they've
already
kind of
been
got
done.
to.
Well, we look forward to that second series, Ross.
Do we?
Now, Meghan was talking about Archie about to lose his first tooth, and she hopes she's at home for that. We've seen another toothless, gappy grin this week from little Prince Louis, who turned 7 this week. And Kensington Palace put out a very sweet new picture of him taken up in Norfolk earlier this month with bluebell woods behind him and a very big grin, no teeth here, looking very sweet. But later, after putting that picture out, what they put out was a behind-the-scenes video where the Prince Louis that we love and we know, that we used to, the hijinks Prince Louis, there he was, scampering around, jumping off a log, talking to the photographer Josh Schinner and the social media team at KP who recorded it. And I was very pleased to see that because in the picture he looks sweet and quite prim and very grown up actually. Slightly like, I worried with the photo slightly that we'd lost the kind of hijinks, scampy Prince Louis. But then when we saw the video, he was all there.
He's got youngest child energy. I'm a youngest child. I do understand this thing.
Definitely does.
Because there's sort of no role left to you except to be the naughty one, I think, when you're the youngest quite often. You've got your sensible older siblings but you're always...
And then the lady boss, Princess Charlotte, who's always bossing him around on state occasions.
Yeah. And I think as well you sort of... you slide into everyone claiming always that you're the favourite, which you never think is true, I think. And at the same time... You sort of try always to keep up with your siblings if you're the youngest. You know, you always want to be doing what they're doing.
Well, I long live Prince Louis's hijinks because I rely on them every year for Trooping the Colour. I'm always covering Trooping the Colour, obviously on a Saturday for the Sunday Times, and I live for his trying to open a window, trying to his misbehaving, because it just gives us great headlines, great pictures.
Yes, yes. The other thing I was thinking with these photos, that, you know, my embarrassing photos, my mother gave my sister, brother, and me all these unfortunate sort of pudding bowl haircuts. Basically the same haircut for the three of us. And, you know, thankfully no one will ever see those photos. But, you know, for him, if your parent ever gives you a dodgy haircut, there it is, you know, forevermore.
I know.
Yeah, and that's hard on a child. In all seriousness, I'm making a joke of it. But actually, that level of scrutiny.
And it's every year for all three of them.
Well, exactly. And if you go through an awkward teenage phase, as again, many children do, you know, that level of scrutiny is difficult. Now, obviously, they're in an immensely privileged position and there are many wonderful things that comes with it. But there are also downsides. And I do think, I would feel very uncomfortable. I think, you know, as a sort of 14-year-old, you know, you got spots or whatever it is, you know, you can imagine that being quite excruciating.
Yeah. I mean, it's the goldfish bowl of the royal family.
Yeah.
Now, one little bit of extra business to discuss is we have the battle of the state visits coming up. So I did a story last weekend with Harry York, our great deputy political editor, that President Macron of France is coming quite soon for a state visit. So we went to France a couple of years ago with the King and Queen for a state visit. It should have been their first state visit in early 2023, but it got postponed because of the riots over Macron's pension reform. So we ended up going to Germany first. We went to Paris and Bordeaux. It was very lovely, very jolly, proper love and romance with Emmanuel and Charles and Brigitte and Queen. Anyway, they're coming here quite soon. And that's quite interesting because it sort of shows what the government are thinking in terms. There's been a lot of discussion around, will Keir Starmer make a decision between Europe and America? Donald Trump's been bigging up the fact he's coming in September. It's not a state visit as things stand. It's hanging out with Charles. Donald Trump has described it as a fest. I don't know how they're going to make it better than the last one. It's going to be a kind of fest.
Yeah.
But Macron's getting in there first. What do you make of that?
I think it's quite telling about what. Well, one, they still feel we're far closer aligned with, you know, despite Brexit. You know, the biggest trading bloc is Europe. Emmanuel Macron is the gateway, isn't he, to the EU in these terms, and so obviously I think there's a closer alignment of personality here too.
You're right.
Macron is capable of being very charming. He's he's able to talk about philosophy in a way that, in his second language, in a way you don't hear many British politicians talking about, for example. And obviously he's an incredibly intelligent. I know he's not popular in France at the moment, but he's an incredibly intelligent politician. I mean, what he has done in France is remarkable. I studied French politics at university. I mean, to break that two sort of party system as it effectively was, he caused a revolution, but it's a centrist revolution. It's so different from what is elsewhere in the world at the moment. Now, obviously, his polling is not pretty, but he's an extraordinary politician and an interesting man.
He gets on very well with Charles.
Yes, I bet he does, yeah.
They chat a lot on the phone. And he's been like the Pope, very outspoken supporter of environmental campaigning and work on climate change, very outspoken on Charles's work there. I think that'll be a great state visit, actually. I think it'll be all the bells and whistles pulled out. It'll be a very fancy state banquet. And then Donald Trump will get a fest of sorts. Yeah. Which he will claim to be bigger than anything else, bigger crowds. Don't possibly protest as Donald Trump.
Well, I think one of the stories you and I did do, didn't he land his helicopters on Queen Elizabeth's lawn?
It was a cracking story, Roz.
Yeah, it was.
It was.
That was a good story, wasn't it?
It was a great tip.
And she was not very happy about that.
She was fuming.
Yeah.
So for listeners, I think
rightly so.
We might have touched on this in a previous one, but let's recount it again because it was a Roz and Roya mashup.
Yeah, it was.
So when Donald Trump came for the state visit in 2019, so he came for a working visit to Windsor in 2018, then he came for the state visit the following year, because he was such a divisive figure at the time, not much has changed, there were huge protests planned in London. He was aware of this. Sadiq Khan said he wasn't going to do anything to stop them. Donald Trump got extremely annoyed about this. And so instead of driving in and out of Buckingham Palace from Wingfield House and Regent's Park, where he was staying, the ambassador's residence, instead of driving in and out in the Beast, the big, president's car that most previous American presidents had driven in and out of. He flew from Wingfield House in a helicopter to Buckingham Palace. Then he flew back in the morning after the arrival.
An environmental
then
catastrophe.
Then in the evening, he flew back in for the state banquet. And then he flew back out 4 times in a day. And a few weeks later, the then Prime Minister of Australia came to the UK on official business and had an audience with the Queen. And after his audience with the Queen, she frog marched him to the front, opened the windows and went, "Look what he's done to my lawns. He's scorched my lawns."
That is brilliant.
And his helicopter had scorched the Queen's lawns. And I remember, it was your tip, it's a great tip. I remember ringing in the palace and saying, "Listen, I got to run something by you." And there was no objection. There was not even an attempt to dissuade me. So clearly the Queen had told not just the Australian Prime Minister, quite a lot of people about that.
Yeah.
She was fuming.
That was a great
very
story. Good Roya smash up. I'm glad about that
anyway, on that note, let's see what chaos and what other things Donald Trump can scorch when he comes for his fest in September. But until then, Raz, thank you so much for joining us on The Royals.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a joy.
Lovely.